So recently I've been looking at a couple of different ways within Power Automate that I could make different API requests, mostly graph requests, but there's a couple of different sort of undocumented APIs that I was looking at trying to use, and ideally using sort of the free connectors. So one example of this was I was trying to get some Teams templates from the Microsoft Graph Teams connector. So if you went Teams and then send a HTTP request with Graph, and you tried to get the beta endpoint just to get some Teams templates, if you try and run this, you'll get essentially an error saying that that endpoint isn't supported. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. Obviously, we could set up an app registration in this instance, but sometimes those are a little bit annoying. Having to manage sort of client IDs and secrets, just an extra thing to manage that isn't always necessary. So I found a solution to this. There's a couple of articles about it online. I'm a little bit late to the party, so there's a good one here by Timo Pertila and David Wyatt, and they all reference essentially the HTTP with Entra ID connector. Now it does require a premium connector, so it depends kind of on your setup as to whether you want to just create an app registration or just use the built-in connector. Either way, you're probably going to need a global admin to approve the API permissions that you're going to be using. And obviously the app registration, you can set up sort of application permissions as opposed to delegated access, which is what we'll be using for these connectors. But if we dive straight in, so if I go to HTTP for Entra, you'll see that there's two of these connectors essentially, and one of them is a pre-authorized connector. So it has a set of graph or whatever API requests already preloaded in there. So what you need to do is provide the base resource URL. So this could be, again, as I said, some Dataverse APIs, some Power Automate APIs, any API that you've essentially got set up or configured in your Microsoft 365 tenancy. So this makes it a really powerful tool, and I think David goes into a bit more detail about some specific examples of that. But if I just use Graph in this example here, it will prompt me to sign in, and then once I'm signed in, I can make some requests. So as I mentioned, this is a delegated API request, so you can do things like send Microsoft Graph me requests just to get the status of me. This is always a good one just to see if your connections are set up correctly. So if you continue here, select run flow, then you'll get a run successfully. But in a similar vein to what I was mentioning before regarding sort of the Teams templates, if I whack that in here now, and again, go to manually test this, you can see that this will just fail. Give it a second. Yeah, there we go. So it's failed. And it gives you a list of the scopes that I believe are pre-authorized on the connector. I'm not actually 100% certain on that because I'm just looking at that now, but I'm pretty sure these are the pre-authorized ones. But as you can see, Teams templates.read is not authorized here. Now, as I mentioned, there is the other connector, which just to make things a little bit more confusing. So if we use this one here, that's not the pre-authorized one, similar vein, go in, enter in your resource URL. So let me just copy that. But what will happen here when I go to sign in is it will basically just boot me out. So the reason for that is because we haven't assigned any permissions to the app registration yet. So you can see here that it provides you with this app reg here. And if we go into that and search for it, you'll find that it's the Power Platform Web Contents v2 connector. And you can see that we haven't got any permissions that aren't already pre-approved. And what you can do is you can kind of take control of this application, but in the documentation, it provides you with a nice little PowerShell script that you can use to amend the permissions. and this will work for both the pre-authorized and the authorized connector. So if we just dive into the documentation, if we use, I think this is the standard connector here. If we go in, you can see that there's a nice section on authorizing the connector to act on behalf of the signed in user. So it gives you some step-by-step details. I won't go into it in too much detail because I'll just link the documentation here, but it's got a PowerShell script that you can download. And then there's a similar set of documentation for the pre-authorized connector as well. It's got a note here about sort of some security things, so you can lock down this this connector if needs be with sort of DLP, etc. So if we go and have a look at the script here, now when I ran it just a second ago, I got an error about execution policies, but you can kind of ignore that because it's just using one that's lower than the one that I'm already using, I believe. Now, for when I was running this script just a moment ago, it did take a second to kick in, but I know that you can manage the permissions of these app registrations through sort of the standard mggraph PowerShell commandlet. So if that's something that you wanted to do, I think Timo writes a little bit about that in there, but I'm just using the script that they provide. So if I just delete this, so I want all the Azure Global recommended ones. It's then going to prompt you to sign in, and you can close this window then, and then I want commonly used apps, so I'm not bombarded with everything here, and then give it a second again to load, and this will give you a list of sort of the resources that you might want to authorize for this app registration. So we want kind of Microsoft Graph. So if we click into here and click OK, then this will open up all of the available Graph API permissions that we can approve for this app registration. So I believe it was for Teams templates, Teams. Sure, it was just team templates.read. There we go. Now, a little bit of useful information here is that if you're going back and then adding in additional permissions using this this PowerShell script, so you've realized that you don't just need Teams templates read, you might need another Teams permissions. If you go in and then just add that one, it will overwrite what's already in the app registration and remove the previous one. And I believe, if I get this right, what you want to do is each time you go in, you need to control click to select the multiple. So if you don't control click, it will just select one. And the mistake that I was making is that it will overwrite it. So I was running the script each time, and I was wondering why I couldn't select multiple permissions. So control click will allow you to do that. And just remember, if you're adding additional permissions to that app registration, to ensure that you select the ones that you had previously as well. Now, as I said, this might not be an issue if you're creating your own script to do this, but it is here. So you get the option here to say impersonate all users or select specific users. In this instance, I'm going to say impersonate all users. Obviously, be careful with these security settings because other people in your tenancy, depending on your setup, could be using these connectors and potentially leverage permissions that they perhaps shouldn't have. So always review that. So I'm just going to confirm that I want to assign that permissions grant. Then you can see here that that has executed successfully. So if we went back to the permissions list now and I refresh this, you can see that sort of the Teams templates read has now been approved on the Power Platform Web Contents v2 connector. And what this should then mean is that I believe if I use either now, it shouldn't particularly matter. But let's just validate that I can now sign in with this one because I've got some permissions applied. So if I go here, plonk that in there, this is when it will fail for my demo. But yeah, because I've now assigned permissions to that app registration, I can now go ahead and use it. So if I now wanted to use the Teams template endpoint that I was referring to previously, then I can now save and run that manually. So I give this a second to run, and all being well, it should allow me to make that endpoint call. So run it here, give it a couple seconds, and all should be good. So yeah, you can see that's gone through successfully. So it really depends on your setup whether this is sort of appropriate for you. As I mentioned, you can always just set up an app registration, but if you're only doing sort of a couple of requests, then I think this is really useful because you're not having to deal with managing sort of client IDs and secrets and everything that comes along with that. But obviously, just be aware that these are delegated permissions. So things like MFA could potentially throw off this connector. So just make sure that you set up relevant sort of conditional access policies, DLP policies as well, if you want to limit the access that this connector has. But I'll link all of the relevant documentation, the script, as well as sort of the useful articles that I found as well. And hopefully other people find this useful and not just me. So there you go.